I'm Jacob Mancini, college pastor at Mission City Church. Welcome to Citywide Live, where we're hosting conversations about culture, God, and what it looks like to follow Jesus today. We're about to talk to one of UTSA's head basketball coaches named Mike Peck about his perspective on what Paul is talking about in 1 Corinthians 9 when he talks about the Christian life as an athletic pursuit. So join us as we talk about training and discipline and how to run this race we all find ourselves in. Welcome, our guest for tonight. This is Mike Peck, everybody. Help me welcome him a little bit with a little... He is, yes, one of our very own head coaches at UTSA for the basketball team. And so birds up, everybody. And excited to have you here tonight, Mike. And we are going to be kind of just jumping into a conversation, one about you, and we'd love to get to know you a little bit, hear your story, but also about what Paul talks about in the New Testament, actually quite a bit, when he describes the Christian life as an athletic pursuit. So he uses the metaphor of, in 1 Corinthians 9, running a race, and kind of says we're all in this race together, and we should run to win. And we read this language, it shows up, like I said, a bunch in the New Testament. Paul loves talking about this. And so we wanted to invite you here as a coach and as someone who loves Jesus, just to kind of give us perspective on how we can maybe look at our life and look at our relationships with God and take a little bit more seriously our own personal discipline and maybe some of the training and some of the getting into shape that we might need to do as Christians today, especially in this season when it's easy to feel out of shape, right?
Yep.
So before we jump into some text, some scripture, I want to give you the floor. Just tell us a little bit about your story and how you came to know Jesus, and just what was that journey like for you?
You know, it's funny because I've always believed, I've always been a believer. I was born and raised a Catholic.
Okay.
I went to, from first grade through senior year in high school, parochial school, Catholic school. And you got religion class, you go to mass, they call it, weekly, almost, like a checklist item. And, it was great. I had a great experience. It was a small school. But I always felt what was kind of weird is I never knew the Bible. I couldn't quote, and I still can't, I spend time in the Word, but not as much like everybody, just to be completely honest, not as much as I need to or I should, and sometimes as much as I want to, and I didn't know the Bible, and I thought that, to me, that was kind of weird. It didn't make sense, because if this is supposed to be, the root and the center of it all, why do I not know more about it? Why can't I, quote scripture and cite verses and things like that? And, so I went through college, went to a small private school, not a Catholic college, but a private business school, and continued to, I'd go to church on the weekends like I was always raised to and stuff. And, but then, after I got out of college, I met my wife, and she's from the South. She's a Southern Baptist. And so, we got married and ultimately ended up in Las Vegas, where my family still lives, and I'm kind of going back and forth as much as possible. And that's when we started attending a Baptist church, which was started by a gentleman, a phenomenal pastor, Vance Pittman, who has got a Southern draw, and they started a church in Georgia, and it's phenomenal. It changed everything. So my first time I went with my wife, went into service, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Catholic service, but it's very kneel, sit, stand, and you look forward, and it's literally an itinerary, and it's every week it's the exact same. And I got into the Baptist church, and it was like, whoa. I mean, people are up, arms are flying around, they're moving, the Spirit's filling, and it's like, it made me nervous. I'll be honest with you, it made me nervous, because I wasn't used to it, and I was just kind of like, okay, I don't know. But then, when Vance started preaching, how he preached and how he translated and related it to current life, and it just reached me. And it was like, this is what I'm talking about. This is what I've been, in the back of my mind, been thinking, like, this is what I need. It's like anything. Some of you have gone through school in high school or in college. You have a math teacher. You might do and get an A from this teacher and you might get a C. Just because of the way they teach, it reaches you, but somehow doesn't reach you. You know, I felt bad and guilty at first. Like I was abandoning my faith as a Catholic of all those years, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, what my parents think, you know. And then I started thinking, you know what? When we go to heaven, there's going to be Catholics up there. There's going to be, you know, Protestants. There's going to be a variety of folks. But I felt like this is what's reaching me. This is the word that's reaching me. And I was like, I'm in the right place. And then I went and I was loving it, and I felt nourished in my spiritual life. And my wife, that was her, and bless her soul, she's made me a better person and makes me want to be a better person. But then there was a stretch there where I was kind of like, the term Christian. Hey, I'm a Christian. I would never go around saying that. And it didn't bother me, but it made me uneasy to a certain extent, because my interpretation at that time was, if you're going to say you're a Christian, then all of a sudden I hear you curse, or or I'm able to witness you sin. It's like, how can you say that, but then do this? And I struggled with that. And I'm going to tell you right now, it was in August of 2006. I went to a service at Hope Baptist, and they were operating out of a temporary, temporary church. It was almost like a cafeteria that they transform on the weekends, and it was a small setting. But there was an assistant pastor. His name was Jeff Riley, and he used to play the guitar and he'd sing. Vance was out this week. He was in and he spoke, and it was his time that it revealed to me, and it all made sense. He spoke and he gave a story about how it was basically in his prayer after we sang initially, and he said, Lord, help me. I fall short daily. You know, I'm here in Las Vegas, Sin City. You know, I fall prey to things that I shouldn't. And it made me, for some reason it clicked, and it said, you know what? Being a Christian doesn't mean you're perfect. And the perfect Christian is what we read about. He's with us in spirit, but he's not with us as a person on earth. That's Jesus Christ. Ain't none of us going to be Jesus Christ. I hate to break it to you, but what I felt was it's the pursuit of a Christ-like life that makes you and enables you to say, hey, I'm a Christian. That means you look up to and you're trying to pursue a life like Christ because you value what that is, and you have that relationship with him. And from that time on, like I'd say, I was all in.
That's awesome.
And that day literally changed me. And here's a great thing to understand. Jeff later left the church, or left Las Vegas in that church, because he fell short in his life. He had some personal issues with his marriage. Vance was very transparent to the church and to us and told us his story. He'd stepped out on his marriage, had some issues. They sent him back where they came from and got him in a program. And he's had some ups and downs since then. But I always tell Vance, when you talk to him, let him know that day changed it for me. And I got to believe at some point as a Christian that Jeff's going to look at that and say, you know what? My life has value if I impacted somebody like that.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of how things kind of evolved for me in terms of where I'm at now in terms of my spiritual life.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It's an incredible story to hear that your wife kind of pulled you into this different world of Christianity, a different side. And what a testament that, man, the God we serve, and Jesus, even though he lived this perfect life that we fall short of, he loves using people in our own stories who are not perfect. Yes. And God can kind of turn what people mean for evil and the mistakes we make, he turns it for good. Like yes. Your story is an example of that.
Yep.
That's cool. Well, tell us a little bit about, since 2006, how you kind of got into coaching at UTSA and, coaching basketball. What was that like? Was that a part of your life at that time, or?
I played in college. I played Division II basketball.
Oh, where did you play?
I played at Northwood University. I'm from Michigan, born and raised. But I knew I wasn't going to be a pro.
Okay.
I was good in college, had a great career, and loved it. So I did what I thought, middle class family, blue collar family, small town. You go to college, you get your degree, you get a job, and you start your career. So I'm like, okay, I did very well in school. Academics was really stressed in our family. Graduated with honors and all that stuff, dual major in economics and management. I said, okay, I'm going to get a job. So I went ahead and got out there and got a job. Oh my gosh, I absolutely hated it.
Get ready, right?
I'm going to tell you, this is a great. At the time, I remember I did it for about a year and a half in the business world, and I told myself, I don't care if you gave me a 7-figure job on Wall Street. I'm not in. I'm not doing it. So I said, I'm not going to do this for the next 40, 50 years of my life. I've got to do something that I love. So I said, what is that? Well, I know I'm not going to play. I'll coach. So I jumped back into coaching where I was from, in the league that I played in, got my master's, and 23, 24 years later, here we are. And it's been phenomenal. I've had a great run. I'm fortunate to be able to do something that I love. I can't call it a job, but technically it is. And it's a passion that I have, and I'm blessed and fortunate to be able to do what I do. I'm not gonna lie to you in that regard.
That's awesome. Well, we're thankful to have you here in our city, and I love the perspective that you have, both as someone who's been following Jesus a lot longer than some of us in here, but also as a coach. So let's jump in together and talk a little bit about 1 Corinthians chapter 9. So this is going to be one of the parts of Paul's letters where he's talking the most about the athletic metaphor, right? Of saying, hey, we're in this race. We're running a race together. So I'm going to read us just a little bit of this text, and then we can just reflect on it.
Yeah.
Does that sound good to you?
Sure.
Just kind of share it from a coaching perspective.
Yep.
How do you think about this? So starting in verse 24, this is 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Paul says this, "Don't you realize that in a race everyone runs, but only one person gets the prize? So run to win. All athletes are disciplined in their training. They do it to win a prize that will fade away, but we do it for an eternal prize. So I run with purpose in every step. I'm not just shadow boxing. I discipline my body like an athlete, training it to do what it should. Otherwise, I fear that after preaching to others, I myself might be disqualified." So looking back at the first part of that, in verse 24, when Paul says, "Don't you realize in a race everyone runs, only one person gets the prize, so run to win." And he says, the way you win is look at the athletes. They're disciplined in their training. I thought it would be fun for us just to take a second and hear from you. What is it like for a college athlete, and we have some college athletes in the room, but what is it like for UTSA basketball player to train to win? Like give us a sense of how that works.
It's the level of nowadays at our level, the commitment level is it's crazy. It's year round. There's no off time. Even when our season's out of season, we refer to it as postseason, and guys are in the weight room and doing on-court work with us year round. That doesn't stop, because if you stop, not to say we don't give them breaks, we'll give them a couple weeks between summer sessions to go home. That's important to be with their family and literally be off their feet and kind of recover with their bodies. But outside of that, it's everything. It's a process of a never-ending cycle that happens to compete at the level you need to. You can't expect success if you don't put in the time. It's like anything. One of the examples I use is, we tell our guys this all the time. In an average, let's just say a 2-hour practice for us, our best player will get anywhere between 9 to 12 shots in that 2-hour window of competition. And I'll ask you this, do you think that's enough shots to get better at shooting? No. So you know what they need to do before or after practice or later in the evening on their own time? Get in a gym and shoot. That's the only way you're going to become a better shooter. You need to shoot the ball. And 9 to 12 shots in a practice in a team setting is not enough to become a great shooter. If you think it is, you're delusional and you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
So the level of commitment is unprecedented. You have to, I was fortunate to experience, coaching with the Portland Trailblazers for 2 years in their organization. And those pros, that's all they do. They don't have classes now, that's their job. But the time they put in committing to their bodies and to their craft is unbelievable. And that's what a lot of people, you don't see what all goes into it. And they don't get a lot of off time. You think it's a great life, they make a ton of money. After the season, do they take some time and get it? Absolutely. But it's not long before they know they need to be back in the gym and putting in the work, because the other guys in the league are. If you're not, you're going to get passed by.
How many hours a day are you, just on average?
We're limited for the NCAA to 20 hours a week.
Okay.
We can work with them.
Okay.
Right now we're going maybe a shade over 2 hours on the floor.
Okay.
But they're doing about 45 minutes to an hour in the weight room with their strength coach.
Yep.
Outside of that. So you add it all up, and it is a job, quote unquote, for them. The responsibility and the dedication and commitment is great.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thanks for sharing some of that
absolutely.
Perspective with us. So continuing on in this text that we just read in 1 Corinthians 9, Paul says that all athletes are disciplined in their training, which we talked about a little bit. And he says they do it to win a prize that will fade away, but we do it for an eternal prize. So I wanted to ask you a little bit of just your story as a coach and as a player. You've been driven for that prize, right? You're competitive.
Yes.
You want to win, and you want to see your players win. Just share a little bit of your experience with us about some of how success and failure and chasing prizes has kind of influenced you and the way that you kind of help people think about disciplining themselves.
Yep. Yeah. It's, well, first I'll just say the one thing I just said today on the practice floor with guys, winning matters. At our level, winning matters. It's about winning, period. It's the cold side of it, of our world at our level, but we need to win, period. And, so with that being said, there's a process to winning. Fortunately, we've all experienced success in our lives in some form or fashion, in some aspect. I've been very blessed and fortunate to have had some phenomenal players that have played for me that helped me win, national championships and then, experience and get to watch them now in the NBA with their careers and do very well. And winning, like that verse says, you're running toward the prize. Mm-hmm. People so much nowadays, you hear about, you guys are on social media, I'm sure, the grind, the process, right? And that's true, but I think there's a lot of kids, and I worry a little bit about my son, he's 12, and he's really into basketball. Some kids get so into the training and working out, quote unquote, with a workout guy or a coach, that is great. But at the end of the day, you take what you do there and you have to apply it, because it's like when you go to class, you take notes, the teacher lectures, you do some homework or handouts, you write some papers. Then guess what the ultimate deal is in determining, there's an exam, isn't there? Or there's tests. To test, what have you learned? So you have to apply what you've done and what you've learned to, for us, it's the games. And, here's what we've worked on drill-wise. Here's what we've drilled over and over and repped. You have to apply that in game. Jeff Van Gundy, I don't know if you guys follow NBA basketball, but he's a phenomenal former coach in the NBA. He did a lot of the color for the games when they were in the bubble. And he had a great quote. He said, you know what? I was a great, great player in drills. He goes, you put those cones out there, I could do it all. He goes, but then I got in a game and those cones were bigger and they moved. I wasn't as good. So again, you've got to be able to apply what you learn and what you rehearse, quote unquote, to what the actual life or game situation. Because that's the ultimate test. Can you retain and apply what you've learned? And for us, that's critical. Some guys struggle with it. Some guys pick it up quick and can do it. Some guys aren't very good at the drill stuff, and it drives you nuts in practice because you want practice to look perfect so you can go in as a coach to the game feeling comfortable. And then they go into games, and they're what you call gamers. When the lights are on and the popcorn's popping, they can just produce. But in practice, they're just not those guys. But then you have great drill guys, so you feel good about going. Then you try to put them in a game. Neil O'Shea said it. We had a kid, Luke Babbitt, played at Nevada, left-handed kid from Reno, great kid, phenomenal kid. He was a pro, had a good little stretch of his career. But Neil would say he's a drill guy. He could knock down deep shots in practices and when you worked out and stuff, but you get him in a game, his numbers didn't reflect that. And he called him a drill guy and ultimately traded him. So, that you've got to be able to, can you retain it? And then can you apply it? And at the end of the day, like we tell our guys, it's about production and results. At the end of the day, because we need to win.
Right.
Winning matters. At our level, that's the important thing. Now, we understand the process of getting to that. There's a way that we do things, and we like to say we do things the right way in terms of treating people and giving them opportunities and that. But at the end of the day, we're judged and measured on our wins and losses.
Yeah, that's really key. The win matters, but you can't get there without applying the things you're learning and training, right?
Yes.
How would you say that can relate to the Christian life, right? So pivoting a little bit, Paul talks about the prize that every runner has his eyes on, her eyes on, but then there's this eternal prize. So unlike a win that fades, where maybe that was a great game, but hey, there's another game coming up, and we have to keep winning. There's this eternal prize for the Christian. Yes. Out in front of us, and it's not fading. It's going to be ultimate victory. How do we think about applying ourselves in a way that we can secure, just kind of make sure that our training is converting to actual progress towards that win as a Christian?
Sustainability is what you're talking about. And that's so much with a program, and that's what we, the buzzword, and I hate to use it, but it's is the culture. I was fortunate to win 3 national championships at the high school level, and so much of ours was about a culture in terms of how the kind of players that we wanted and how we developed those players, not only on the floor but off the floor. Responsibility, accountability, holding those guys accountable. No one person is bigger or more important than the program. And if that meant our best player didn't do something right and we had to sit him for a half or not play him in a game, so be it. Because that ultimately, if you don't do it, it's going to come back to haunt you and that individual. You're not hurt. Proverbs. I love Proverbs. I spend, I do the thing for the month where you read the one, and it's quick and it's easy for me.
Proverb a day?
Yes, absolutely. So, it's like, my favorite one is Proverbs 24. I love some of the terms they use. The sluggard, doesn't plow during harvest, but then when it comes time, he's got nothing. So it's like about work.
That's right.
And the one proverb, is it 23:13, where it talks about don't withhold discipline from a child. The rod won't kill him, but you'll save his soul if you do. And it's hard. Nobody wants, my son, I remember growing up, I didn't want to, I won't go on record and say this, get in trouble, but you don't want to spank him. Yeah. But they don't know what they don't know. When we have guys that, the benefit that I have when I look at our guys that are between 18 and 22 years old is, guess what? I was 18 or 22 at one time. Some things they don't know what they don't know. And you have to tell them, but you also have to hold them accountable. And accountability is hard because sometimes, but I always say you can't compromise your integrity of the program or yourself, because compromise is the first sign of destruction. And if you do that, like I said, ultimately, you'll feel that pain down the line. It may not be tomorrow and it may not be in a week, but down the line, that is going to have repercussions and consequences that are going to hurt you more than what you originally thought or expected.
Sure. Yeah, and a great way, like the Proverbs are reminding us to avoid, compromise, whether that's moral compromise or another kind of just a gutter we could fall into if we're not careful is with this discipline. And as a coach, you understand that. As a parent, so let's talk a little bit about the end of this text that we've been looking at. Paul says, "I run with purpose in every step. I'm not just shadow boxing." I wanted to ask you. You're in the college sphere and getting to work with college students, college athletes. What would you say right now is in the category of shadow boxing for college students today? Like, what's something that you would say, hey guys, watch out for this. Don't waste your time and use discipline to make sure that you're throwing punches at the right places. What would that be from your perspective?
There's several things in several different aspects of their life. Number one is this. This you know is as great as it is. It hurts us in some ways, because a lot of I'm guilty of it. I am. The self-discipline of putting it down. How this is messed up. I was thinking about this morning when I was going to come here, and I want to make sure I told you. So I get up I'm a routine guy. I like as I get older, I need a little time to get my body going in the morning. So I get up, brush my teeth, take a shower, get dressed, and I go out and I make myself a cup of coffee, and I sit on my couch. I've gotten better because I don't turn my TV on. I'm a big TV guy, so I don't turn my TV on. But I hit this. Mm-hmm. I check my emails, and there's a D1 ticker. It tells you all the news going on in Division I athletics. So you go through that. Then I go to Facebook to see what's going on with people that we know and our friends and family and stuff like that. Then I'll go to Twitter and see what's going on there. Then I pick up my Bible. And I sit there and I laugh at myself and I say, there's something wrong with that. You know what I mean? Why wouldn't that be the first thing I would do? And I know it and consciously do it. Mm-hmm. But then I justify it like we all do. I say, well, I'm just going to get this out of the way so I can really focus. Because if I don't, I'll be focusing on what's next, which is this, if I'm in the Word. Mm-hmm. That's some truth to that. So I rationalize with myself and I say I'm doing okay. At least I'm in the Word. But, the time management and the time you spend on this it's detrimental, because it's time that you could be putting into not only the Word, but in relationships with your teammates, with schoolwork that's important, and with your body and rest. As demanding as our days are, your body needs rest and recovery. If we only have a couple guys that are disciplined to get themselves to bed by 10 or 10:30. Other guys, I get it. They're night owls. They ain't going to bed because they're going to game and they're going to do this till 1:30 or 2, and then they're going to have a hard time getting up. And then the next day it shows. And that's just not healthy. Right. So
that's a good practical, bedtime and organizing your morning in a way where you can actually put first things first.
Yes, exactly. So this is a culprit of a lot. As good as it is in terms of bringing us together and giving us information, mm-hmm. it can be, I should say, harmful.
Sure.
I always say America's the greatest country at creating needs. If you think about it, wants and needs are very different. We really don't need this to live. You don't need it. Now, I'm as guilty if I can't find it, and a lot of times I'm like, oh my God, where's my phone? Yeah. And it's like right there. And I panic. And then my heart skips a beat, and I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to function? And it's like, you can live. We can live. We can do it. The world made it up to the mid-90s without them just fine. And so I think this is a big part of what can be harmful if you can't manage it responsibly.
Yeah, I see that. So in Philippians 3, and we'll kind of start wrapping up with this text, Paul talks about running. It's another running metaphor, right, for the Christian life. And he says in in Philippians 3, verse 12, he talks about, I press on to possess the perfection for which Christ Jesus first possessed me. And he says, I haven't achieved it yet, but I'm focusing on one thing, forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead. And so I really wanted to talk to you about this. In the next verse after that, he says, what lies ahead, he's straining toward the prize of the upward call of God in Jesus. And I wanted just to ask you a kind of final question. What is the importance of having a single-minded focus. You see this in athletes. They've got to have no distractions, right?
Yep.
What's the importance as a Christian of forgetting what is behind us? And how have you experienced that as we look at Jesus and say?
It's a great point. It's like being an athlete. Everybody knows competition, there's a winner and a loser. And you can't dwell on the losses, because like anything, if you just consume yourself and get so immersed in the loss and you can't get past that, then that's going to turn into the next loss and the next loss and the next loss. You're going to feel the pain, and you should feel it for a little bit, but then you should learn from it. And then you got to let it go, and you got to focus on, okay, what do I need to do to avoid that next time so that I don't have to go through this? I always say, do you love winning or do you hate losing? And my thing is, I hate losing. The worst 10 seconds of my life every year or every game is the handshake line after a loss. You've got to go through 10 seconds where you basically, and for us, we might travel to Miami, Florida to play one of the Florida schools. So we leave the day before, we get down there, you're doing the airport, you're doing the meals and all this, and the cost of that, the time that you spend going over scouting reports and the other opponent and watching film and talking and practicing and game plan, and then you lose, and you're like, we could have just called them and said, you know what, take the win, we're not coming. Saved a lot of money, saved some grief, and saved a lot of time. So to me, going through that line and shaking hands saying, congrats, good job, that's the 10 seconds that I can't stand. And my thing is I'll do whatever it takes to avoid that versus the feeling of winning. Don't get me wrong, feeling winning is great, but you do it more so for me as a competitor to avoid the feeling of losing. And I think you can't dwell on losses because it's like anything in life. And I'll tell you this story. Some of you guys are too young, but I would advise, Google the guy Steve Hartman. Steve Hartman is a broadcast journalist, an award-winning broadcast journalist, and he used to do a spot that called Everybody Has a Story. And I thought it was phenomenal. Back in the old days, I guess, for you guys, there used to be phone books and public phones, and they'd be like thick. Well, he'd basically take a camera crew and go around the country, and basically, he started a map in the United States in his office and he'd point. And he goes, okay, Gaylord, Michigan, that's where I'm from. I just say, he'd point there, that's where we're going. He'd get on a plane, he'd go, boom. He'd get there, he'd find the first public telephone. He'd get the telephone book, open that thing up, he just closed his eyes, he ran like, boom. He'd point to a name, Mike Peck. That's where we're going. His point was, everybody has a story. And what he would do is he would find out something about that individual in their past, somehow connected in their family, where there was a story that was interesting, that was somehow very appealing. And he would do a report and they'd put it on TV and they'd show it. It was fascinating. And I say that to tell you, right now especially, this is a fragile time in society with individuals and mental health. And, they always say, don't judge someone until you are in their shoes. You don't know what anybody's going through. And so you guys look up here at me, and this is a blessing, and I always, he's doing what he loves, he's got a great career. But I'm going to share you something about me that relates to this, and I'll get to the point. You can't dwell. In the ultimate loss in life, I think a lot of you would agree, is death. Okay, so the day after Thanksgiving of my senior year in college, I was 22 years old. I'll never forget, I was down, I had to go back early like we always do because we have practice, season's opening up. I go down, I'm practicing, I'm in my apartment with a couple of my teammates, we're just hanging out after, we went twice that day, we're tired, watch TV, and I get a call from my coach. Hey coach, what's up? He didn't call, we just saw him. Hey Mike, you got an aunt that might be trying to get in touch with you? I'm like, I have aunts, but trying to get in touch with me? I don't think so. And he goes, oh yeah. He goes, where are you at? And I go, I'm at my apartment. And he goes, okay, yeah, well there's an aunt, I think, that's trying to get in touch with you. This is before cell phones, so sure. That's why. I should have prefaced that. So he comes over, he asks my two teammates if they'll leave and go to their place. So now I know something's up. And the news, and I said, okay, my thing was, okay, which one is it? Is it my mom or dad? And he said, I don't have the facts and I can't confirm it yet. He goes, but it's both. Both my parents were killed in a car accident coming back from doing some shopping after Thanksgiving from a town in Michigan. They were rear-ended and it was immediate. And I was like, oh my gosh. So it's just me and my sister, my older sister, 1 year older, and she was already out of school and working and stuff, but living back at home with them. And so my whole thing was basketball was my sanctuary. We had a game the next day. We were going to play in Windsor, Ontario, and I said, look, I'm playing. So I had to kind of push and say, so I played. I went and played, and I go, I'll deal with this after. Because, when I stepped between the lines, you'd forget everything, and it was kind of a release. So I went and played and then dealt with everything afterwards. But in the midst of all that, I realized, making the plans, going through the funeral. And it was after the funeral that I was sitting in a restaurant with my sister and a couple other close friends of the family, and we were sitting there, and I looked out the window into my hometown, and I was kind of still a little bit numb, I guess you could say, but there was cars going by and people walking on the sidewalk. And I thought to myself, don't you people know what's going on? Don't you know what's happened? And that's part of what I felt, but it was like, you know what? The world, as cruel as this sounds, the world doesn't care, because the world is not going to stop. People are going to go to work, they're going to get in their car, they're going to go about their lives, and life is going to continue. So I had a choice. I could crawl up in a corner, and I could wallow in self-pity and feel sorry and feel bad, or I could say, you know what? It is what it is. I've got to move on. I've got to move. I'm alive, and I've got to live a life, a productive life. And that's what I always, that's the way I've always looked at it. And through all of that, I got to be honest with you, anything that's ever bad that's happened to you in life, whether you break a bone or you get sick or you lose a loved one, I never, ever blamed God. I can't tell you why. I never got mad at him, and I never questioned, why would you do this to me? I never did that. My immediate perspective, and this is no lie, after that happened was, there was a part of me that said, okay, they're gone. I was so grateful and thankful that I had the 22 years that I had with them, because I got to be honest with you, if it would have happened when I was 13 or 14, let me tell you something. I don't know if I'd have made it. I don't know if I would have been able to handle it. And at 22, I was about to graduate from college and kind of be on your own, quote unquote. And it was like, I thanked God versus blaming him. I said, thank you for the 22 years for getting me ready and basically into adulthood. Because if it had happened sooner, I don't know. I don't know what would happen. I don't know if I'd have made it. And that's perspective, I guess you could say. So fast forward, my wife and I get married. We have our first child, and she's 21 now. But if you saw her, you'd say, oh, she looks probably like she's 9. She was born with an anomaly, chromosome 18, Q minus is what it's called. Comes with a whole host of health issues. She's 100% dependent on adult care, wheelchair-bound, nonverbal. She can eat pureed foods, but she's never going to say, hey, I'm thirsty, or hey, I'm hungry. We kind of go off of feel and time. And, there's another incident where it's like, why? And instead of the why, that little child didn't have time. We didn't have time like that. And my wife's faith and our faith was so big that we just basically, you had to tackle it. And there was a challenge after challenge after challenge. You know what? We don't have time to feel sorry and say, oh my gosh, we got to just do our best in taking care of this child and making sure she's healthy and safe, which we did, and thank God. And then over the course of time, you realize this child has not spoken one word in her 21 years of life but has impacted more lives than I can or ever will. And it's phenomenal. And that's God. And again, I go back to, did I say why us? Why? Instead of that, thanking him for trusting us to put her in our life to teach me things that I would never have learned without her. True patience, unconditional love, you name it.
Wow.
But it's all about perspective. And I think that's so important. And now is a time that's hard, where things are hard, my life's tough. Oh yeah. What do you have to be thankful and grateful for? As opposed to thinking and focusing on the negative, what are the things that are great in your life that you have to be thankful for and grateful for? You know, food on your table, clothes on your back, a roof over your head, parents, friends, sisters, brothers, uncles, aunt, whatever. That's perspective, and that's so important nowadays.
Mike, thank you for sharing your perspective with us, and honestly, just those personal stories were powerful. I feel like I'm encouraged to think about the things in my life, and as you were talking, even the perspective of thanking God for the things that he's allowing and bringing into your life. This thought just came to me as you were talking, seeing God as the better coach, as the one who's trying to both discipline but also set me up for the next win that's in front of me. Ultimately, that's the upward call of God, and I love how in your story and the things you've shared, you've seen God do incredible things. You've seen this upward call of, hey, we press on because Jesus is he's better, and he's good. He's got good things in store. And thank you so much for your time tonight. And everybody, help thank Mike. Really appreciate you being here.
Absolutely.
As we close out here, any final words of encouragement for these college students?
If you have any, listen, this is more about you, and I like smaller settings because, if you have questions, please ask. Because I know in bigger venues and bigger events, it's hard because there's so many people and there's, hey, if you have any questions, not that look, like I tell our players, I don't have all the answers, but I have some of them. And, some of those might be the ones that you have questions about. So don't hesitate to reach out. And the one thing I will say, when you struggle and you're going through a tough time, my wife used this when I was out one year of coaching, and it was hard. It was ebb and flow, ups and downs, because your identity as a coach for 20-some years, and now all of a sudden you're not with a team or a program, and you're kind of like, But look up, don't look down. The answer's there, not here. And I always thought that was good. Look up, not down.
It's good. Well, thank you again, Mike.
You're very welcome.
And thank you all for being here. This has been another Citywide Live. So, thanks for joining us in this conversation about following Jesus. If you want to jump into our next Citywide event, follow us on Instagram at missioncity.college. We'll see you next time.